Okay, and now we will have our morning address. Today's address will be given by Joan Beater. Joan has been a member of the Ethical Humanist Society of Long Island for over 40 years. She has served on numerous committees, any number of boards, and has served as president of our society. She is Professor Emeritus in the Yeshiva University School of Social Work and has been teaching there since 1992. And she is still active teaching at that school. She is also adjunct associate professor of social work at Stony Brook University. Her areas of scholarship include social work with the military, working with those with serious medical illness and death and dying. She has written numerous books and articles and spoken at dozens of national and international conferences. She is the mother of 2 grown sons and a loving grandmother. Today, she will talk about change and how we all deal with it in different ways. Joan?
Well, hello, everybody. It's so nice to see so many people, many of whom I know, obviously, and some I don't know, but great to have you all aboard. So I've taken the liberty of altering, changing, if you will, our usual Sunday format of having music preceding the speaker. First of all, it's summer, and why not? And it'll be one of the small changes for today. So my topic is change. And as a true academic, which you heard about my credentials, we always begin with some kind of a definition. So what is change? Well, as a verb, it means to become different. Change, transformation, alteration, however we name it, for most of us, it's a challenge with few equals. That is, if we're talking about long-term, sustained change, not the kind that kind of sputters before real change can happen. So whatever kind of change, diet, exercise, sustained change, whatever kind we have, any of the behavioral stuff that we try to change, changing may be one of the hardest things that any of us will ever try to do. But why? It's so fundamentally illogical, as change is the only constant thing of life, and the adaptations that have to be made can often be very positive, even adaptive, and lead to a much better self. So again, why is it so damned hard? Change can come from numerous parts of our lives, from experiences, obviously, from without, from within. There are sources of change that resonate and move us into a new direction. Or we just get sick and tired of who and what we are. For many, the mere mention of the word change, or just considering making change, can cause uneasiness. For some, change initiates feelings of fear. More on why it's so hard to change in a little bit. Okay. So change can be externally motivated or internally motivated, or both. Externally motivated change means that something outside of us has created the need for us to adapt, to change, like COVID. Many of us before COVID wore masks on a regular basis. None of us did. So external things over which we have almost no control will provoke change. And that's difficult enough. Internal motivation, the kind that comes from within, may come from some kind of self-reflection, concern that one needs to be different, to be accepted, liked, etc. And sometimes there's an amalgam of both internal and external motivation. An example of change and struggle, I want you to listen to a song by Stevie Nicks, and she sings about the challenge of a personal change based on an experience that she had of loss. She had a romance that ended, and it was very painful. I'm going to ask you to note about what she's saying. Is that she wrote this song soon after a very significant relationship had ended for her. And I read about the history of the writing of the song. And she says that the important part of the whole song and the motivation for the song is the experience of having lost a very loving relationship that she had. And she refers to the landslide as being drawn back into some of the sadness. But then she says, well, I've been afraid of changing because I built my life around you, meaning that she built it around this relationship and this person. But she basically is also saying, time moves on, children get older, I'm getting older too. But she also notes how afraid she is of changing. I've been afraid of changing. And so, don't we all feel some of that at times? Is it because we're so used to being in a certain way? Is it because we see things in a certain light and we just don't even want to change it or move it? Or is there so much that's unknown on the other side of the change? Simply put, change means just that. Something will not be as it had always been. And that can be scary or sad, as in loss. But maybe it doesn't have to be that way. And maybe we can avoid the landslide that Stevie Nicks talks about. We'll see. I can certainly relate to the sentiment that the song provokes, as my life has been upended over the last few years based on the illness and subsequent death of my husband of 50 years. Our lives, just like in the song, were built around a common bond and history, and the changes were substantial as his health deteriorated. He died, I sold a house, I moved to an apartment, I adopted a new identity as a single person, as a widow. Major life shifts, significant and encompassing shifts, sadness mixed with anguish, and a huge degree of unsettlement about the unknowns. Yes, circumstances definitely do force us to change, and it is often not easy. This change that occurred in my life and similar types of change are all along the way not linear and often require adaptations in stages and the creation of new ways of being. It has been and is difficult at times and always a challenge. Externally motivated change. What does all that mean? And haven't we all had to have made and continue to make substantive changes recently? I refer to this as kind of the external forces that provoke the change, new ways of being. And over the last year plus, because of COVID, all of our lives have made a significant turnaround. And here we are thrust into making change, not necessarily that we want to, or is it always welcome? And perhaps there's an upside that a change of this type and situations that we have no input but must adapt to, maybe there are plus sides to that. In the midst of it, it may be difficult to find them. Robert Merton, who was a sociologist, coined the term unintended consequences. And actually, I prefer to use the term in a much more positive way. Outcomes, positive outcomes, or new opportunities. Consider that we have created new ways of working, of socializing, of relating. We have figured out a lot of the technology that was completely obscured to us and not even known by us. We've harnessed technology again for health, for socializing. How many of you, myself included, have had virtual health checkups? We shop differently. Yes, we certainly have lost many, and perhaps we have reassessed our priorities. And we have used the word unmute in sentences for the first time in our lives on almost a daily basis. Think about it. Did you ever use those words in a sentence before? Unmute. And yet this morning we probably tossed it around 5 times. What a shock to our systems. COVID has been What a shock to our brains. And our brains, for the most part, are oriented to operating with that which is familiar. So when all of this COVID stuff began, we almost didn't know what to do with ourselves. And yet, for many, the adaptations have not been quite as awful as we thought they were. Last week in our Ethical Society and our Sunday morning presentation, we heard a very interesting and a very informative discussion on climate change. And yes, what the speaker was talking about had very serious consequences, but she had numerous suggestions regarding what we as individuals could do to impact the climate catastrophe that we are facing. The suggested changes are often on a very, that she made, these suggested changes were on a personal level and also in a broader context, but change was at the heart of her talk. It was informing and helpful as she detailed personal and societal changes that could impact the climate. Here it is again, change, change, hopefully for the better. One way of viewing change is to see the potential for a better way of thinking and evaluating, a new direction that perhaps was not even visible or even thought about as something to be altered or accomplished. Maybe reframing change as an opportunity. Climate change, and yes, even COVID, perhaps through COVID, we have learned to cherish what we have developed over these many months. And again, COVID and Zoom has deprived of us our usual Sunday morning habitat, and we are eager for community, and we are in person hungering for interchange. And yet we have survived and maybe even grown a bit closer, eager for the hugs that we will exchange when we enter our respective buildings, hopefully with a new and renewed sense of who we are and who we are to each other. If we were to summarize perhaps some of the changes on an emotional level that COVID has provoked, is that many of us have reassessed relationships, the centrality of our relationships, and the importance of relationships in all of our lives. Now move to the challenge of more internal change, kind of framed it as external. These are the external things that we have to adapt to, AKA make changes around, but on a more internal level. These changes may come from self-reflection, from perhaps even an outside suggestion, from an awareness that part of us needs some kind of tweaking. We as humans tend to be rote in many areas of our lives, including our emotional responses and our awareness. Many ways of being are ingrained from long ago, and they may have served us well. Not everything that I'm commenting on is negative, far from it. But unless examined, unless we look at some of the areas of our lives, some of our habitual reactions to things, we will not be open for change. And often the motivation for the opening is some suggestion from an outside event, perhaps even a caring person makes a comment, a screw up that you may have inadvertently made. But the key component of this type of change, this internal change, is looking at oneself and looking critically, perhaps or with kindness, but with self-reflection towards seeking to be better. I'm going to ask a rhetorical, foolish question, perhaps, but I want you to think about it. How many of you took a shower today? You really do not have to answer that question, but I want you to think about the shower. I want you to consider that shower follows a very prescribed routine. You have taken that same shower hundreds, if not thousands of times. How about when you brush your teeth? You brush your teeth exactly the same way every time. Let's go back to the shower. Consider your shower routine. I start from the head and work down. My shower takes about 7 minutes, maybe 8. Now, consider that we are in California, where there is a serious water shortage. And we are told that we now must ration water. And now we have to limit the time in the shower. Well, but I'm used to my 7 minutes in the shower. I now have to completely redo my routine in the shower. And while, again, this example may sound a little bit lightweight and kind of silly, what I'm saying, though, is that I have to make a change in my habits. And you can bet that that's not going to be easy. The same can be said of certain behaviors. What I do automatically in the shower for those 7 minutes now is going to have to change to something else. In terms of behavior, my automatic responses that I reflexively just do because they're me, there are times when that needs to be examined. That there are times that those habits or those immediacy of responses are not necessarily the best thing for you, but they're so deeply ingrained. Recently, I became aware that I had said something to two different people, very dear people in my life, that upset them. I was just talking my stuff, was not aware that I had said something that offended them. When I became aware that these interchanges had happened and that my dear friends were upset with me, I thought long and hard about those interchanges and agreed that I had been unthinking. Just my usual banter. But going forward, I will monitor these responses and how they and try and consider how they might land on somebody else. Habitual behavior needing change. Ugh, it was soul searching. I felt miserable, but it was essential. And going forward, I will be much more conscientious. There are many, by the way, in the field of psychology and in the therapy world who believe that unless we look at deeply ingrained and automatic responses, there will not be change. Those who work from what's considered a cognitive base say very simply that thinking shapes behavior. How we think ends up how we behave. Therefore, it is important to understand what one is thinking and examine one's thoughts, examine one's habitual responses. And this is one way and one route to changing behavior, if we want to. And again, I felt pretty crummy that I had hurt two very dear people in my life, unwittingly, completely without thought. But now I have to think about it in the same way that I'm going to have to think about my 4-minute shower that used to last 7 minutes. Habitual, ingrained behaviors that, unless challenged, will usually go on forever. And it's not always bad, but unless challenged, many of our behaviors will not change, as the unexamined behavior is often the hardest to change. And sometimes the only motivation to change could be external. Water shortage, climate destruction. Some change will occur because of an external situation. And again, the others may be from internal self-reflection, and or somebody says to you, you really hurt my feelings when you said that. But we always tend to resist change. Consider this. You have your annual checkup, and the doc tells you that blood work came back with some anomaly. And diet and exercise changes are mandated. And that means no more butter-laced croissants, no more ice cream, no more cheesecake. Oh my God, you say. And that there's a very strong part of you that acknowledges that this is the best route for you to maintain good health. But exercise and diet change, giving up chocolate and lose 25 pounds, just shoot me, forget it. However, the other part of you in your brain says, are you being an idiot? Do you want to live another 20 years? You do exactly what they tell you to do. So here is the paradox of change. That even though we know or anticipate that it will produce a good outcome, we resist it. Aren't we all strange? Aren't we all pieces of work, as the kids would say? Again, why is there such resistance to change? Well, someone has said the key to change is to let go of fear. So let's look at that for a moment. What fear is there? Obviously, there's fear of the unknown. Your mind fears the unknown because it considers what is known is safe and it's familiar, and I know what to expect. So if I have to be different, if I have to lead my life differently, I don't know what that's going to look like, so the hell with it. Plus, there's always the fear of failure. If one does not try and make change, well, obviously, it's not going to happen. And I'm safe, but it doesn't mean I'm good. There is also fear of success. It seems like an oxymoron almost, but success comes with baggage. It comes with expectations. You might feel pressure. Successful change, if one understands family dynamics, if there's a change in one part of the family, a family is a system, and if one member of the family changed significantly, that will ricochet throughout the system, and it has the potential to upset long-held dynamics in the relationships. Family members, for example, may not like the really new you, who is perhaps more assertive, not compliant. They prefer the old you, who kind of just did what everybody wanted you to do. So it comes with baggage, it comes with expectations. So change of that sort, fear of success, I'm now going to be, I've learned how to assert myself, I've learned how to be on my own page, et cetera, et cetera. Well, not everybody's going to like that new you. You will be different, better, probably, but different. And that can be scary also. It's also fear of criticism. People are, if you announce that you're really going on this diet routine and you're going to start doing exercise and all of that stuff, and you falter, now people are going to start to be critical of you. And people are so afraid of what others think that they'd almost rather not try. They would rather sit it out than risk being criticized. There's also fear of the new. People are afraid of anything that's new or different. Maybe we fear change because we cannot anticipate what the outcome what the outcome might be. Maybe a different mindset, however, about change could be motivating. Is there any kind of a mental mindset that can make change easier, more acceptable? Indeed, there are. And what I would like to say is that these ways involve a different conceptualization of change and the challenges inherent in change. I've been told that I see the negative in many situations. So what I'm saying to you applies to myself as well, and the need for me to change my way of thinking, perhaps. First and foremost, accept the inevitability of changes, that things will not always be as they are or have been. And change is just going to happen either with circumstance, with age, with health, with pandemics, or just crappy luck. If we keep denying change, rejecting and resisting it, we may well stagnate and even give up the change effort altogether. If we lose 3 pounds those first few weeks, knowing that the goal is 25 pounds, we may get discouraged and say, the heck with this. As well, if we try to be more social, for example, try to be less judgmental and hit a wall with that effort, well, give it another try, knowing full well that reconfiguring our thinking is perhaps one of the hardest changes of all. If we see change as an opportunity, perhaps that helps. Another reason we derail in our efforts to change or accept change is that trying to change all at once instead of over time is unrealistic. If we see it as as a gradual effort, one that takes time, thought, often with setbacks, but moving toward an overall goal, it can be more easily achieved. In other words, if we cut ourselves a break and say, okay, I moved ahead, I took a half a step back, but I'm still going to get back on that path. Change usually happens in increments and hopefully in stages that reap some rewards and reinforcements to keep up the effort. And we tend to underestimate the process. Change is never just one thing, it's a lot of connected things. Long-term behavior change requires numerous steps. It's easy to want to believe it's simple, but nothing about behavior change is really simple. It's a tough challenge to move that behavior needle, even a little. Don't forget that failure or backsliding is a given when you are trying to make substantive changes. Consider how many alcoholics, drug-dependent people, for example, endeavor to abstain and have a relapse. In the world of addiction, it's expected, it's anticipated and dealt with. Taking a back step is part of the process and should be seen as a step, not the end or an excuse to stop trying. How hard it is to go out with friends while you're trying to lose those 25 pounds and they're all eating to end the world. And everybody's ordering lasagna while you consider ordering a salad. Really? It's tough. Furthermore, don't try to change too much. If one can change one behavior long-term and stick with it, that's commendable change. Trying to change too much puts unrealistic demands on the self and the efforts that we initiate. Small steps, small ones, sometimes to reinforce commitment. Now back to the personal. What I have known and had reinforced numerous times and ways is that change and social support go hand in hand. Social support is a major ingredient in change. Having the support of caring friends who want the best for you can be the pivot that moves us toward change. Our ethical societies often provide that sense of connection and support and long-term friendship. We care about each other. What a joy to open the Zoom room and see all of us interacting. How are you doing? What's going on with you? What's new? What's going on? We care about each other. We all greet one another, and we are really glad to see one another. Hopefully, we'll be doing all of this soon face to face. But the bedrock of friendship and caring is what has sustained me and much of what has come through connection to the ethical societies.
Thank you, Joan. I think you touched everyone's heart this morning. Thank you so much.
Well, again, I want to just kind of reiterate that the final song is really to reinforce that this part of the strength of the ethical society and our community is the friendship and the social support that we gain from each other. And when we talk about change, we're all in the midst of change. Change is ubiquitous. It comes from all over the place. And all I can say is that the connection and the sense of community that our societies provide is one of the more sustaining aspects, certainly of my life and hopefully of all of yours. So thank you all.